Major carbon reductions are worth the money. Mr. Huber, I want to thank you for your novel argument, summed up as, no, we can't. You begin by saying you care about the world's poor, and then you start by saying the 5 billion poor people are the problem. We're going to send our jobs to their shores. They have too many children. This type of contempt will not lead us towards the world that we want to build for our kids, either here or across the world. The question at hand, and the question we face, is, are major reductions in carbon worth the money? And I'll very simply give examples at the level of the economy, at the level of a corporation, and the level of the individual. Not is it all investments, every investment, is are major reductions worth the money? Mr. Huber, I read that you wrote about enhancing America's electric power grid. That's a great way of having great reductions in carbon in a way that's very much worth the money. We waste about 6 to 10% of all energy through America's very inefficient electricity grid. If we invested in a smart grid, it could save up to $20 billion a year that's lost through line loss. Major carbon reductions can be worth the money. Americans spend about a week a year, if they commute a lot, stuck in their cars. That costs the economy in terms of productivity and fuel cost about $78 billion a year. If we invested in new traffic software and signaling, public transportation to create those green jobs that you have such contempt for, we could in fact reduce that greatly. Major carbon reductions are worth the money. At the level of a corporation, more and more corporations are not just doing it because it's fashionable, they're doing it because they're building a strategy for sustainability to move them forward. I'll give you a few examples. Xerox, the iconic American company, around the year 2000 was on the verge of bankruptcy. It was at its knees, and the vultures were circling. And Anne Mulcahy, the CEO, when she took over, she committed that by 2012 they would reduce their carbon output by 10% between 2002 and 2012. And they got to it. They started investing in remanufacturing. And today, 91% of all the parts in Xerox machines are remanufactured or recycled, which means you don't need to get new stuff from the earth, and much better from a carbon emission standpoint. Well, by the year 2006, they reached that 2012 goal. They reached the 10% reduction, and they actually committed to a 25% reduction by the year 2012. Today, in 2009, they're at about 21%, and they're well on the way. There's a company that's more productive, that's making more money for its shareholders because of strict carbon restrictions. Sun Microsystems has about half of its workers telecommuting. That saves the worker a few $100s up to $1,000 because they don't have to commute anymore, and it saves the company money. Last year, about $68 million in avoided costs because they didn't have offices for all these people. People get to be more productive, they get to work in their pajamas, it's a win-win all over the place. Major reductions in their carbon use, about 30,000 metric tons saved by that, are good and worth the money. Finally, a company that I do work with, Walmart. Walmart made 3 commitments in its turnaround. 1, to be powered 100% by renewable energy, which would be a major reduction in carbon. 2, to produce zero waste, which would reduce their carbon emissions. And 3, to only sell green products in their stores. Major commitments by a major manufacturer. They pushed this down the supply chain. It pulled energy out, lowering the cost of the products, lowering the cost to the consumer. And one of the reasons a company like Walmart is doing so well right now is that they become more efficient because of a focus on major reductions in carbon. And one of the associates I was able to work with at Walmart was named Chuck Bonnet. I want to give you as an example at an individual level how major reductions can actually make sense. Chuck worked at the meat counter at Walmart, and he made a personal sustainability practice commitment to reduce the amount of carbon emissions that he had personally, a major reduction in his personal life in carbon emissions. And he tried to figure out what to do, and he was actually in line at a fast food restaurant. And as he was in this line waiting for his burger, he watched all the cars idling. He thought, oh, that's carbon. Then he thought about the hamburger, which had been frozen and shipped across, maybe across the country, perhaps across the world. And he thought about the carbon that came from the cow. And he thought about the plastic that was wrapping this hamburger. And he thought, if I cut that out, it's not going to be good for my health. And he had to lose about 100 pounds. Maybe I can get a discount on my health care. And actually, maybe I can save some money because I'll cook meals at home rather than going out so much, which a lot of people across the world are doing who have the opportunity to eat out. In this case, major reductions in his own personal carbon emissions were worth the money. Now, our opponents tend to focus on the fact that we can't do everything and that there are other problems. And yes, there are other problems and we need to work on them. For example, I could tell you tonight that there are exit signs at the back of the theater, and There's one at the side of the theater, and that's probably very important in case there were a fire. But maybe I could instead tell you about influenza, because that's the 8th largest killer in America, and it might tell you to worry about the person next to you, because they might be a little sickly, and you might need to worry about them. Or maybe I could check your purses, or check your dinner reservation for later tonight, because maybe you'll decide to go out and have a dessert or a creamy special appetizer, because you know that heart disease is the greatest killer in America. These things are all true, but we can do two things at once. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. And the great thing about carbon is that it's one single thread. If you pull it, the entire sweater begins to unravel. It's one single step that can help people save money and live better lives at their individual level, at a corporate level, and even at an economy-wide level. Major reductions in carbon are good for the economy and are absolutely worth the money. Thank you.